I never thought I'd be the guy writing a story like this. I mean, isn't this the kind of thing that happens to someone else? A sad tale you hear about at a bar or from a friend of a friend, the type of thing you shake your head at, grateful that it isn't your life. Yet here I am, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of how everything fell apart. My name is Jack. I'm 46, and for most of my life, I thought I had things figured out. I've been married to my wife, Megan, for almost 20 years. We've had our ups and downs like anyone else, but I always thought we were solid. I work as a project manager for a construction firm. The hours can be long, but it's a good job. It pays well, and it let me build the life we both wanted. Megan was a teacher before we had kids, but once our son, Ethan, was born, she decided to stay home for a while. We have 2 kids now, Ethan, who's 18 and just started college, and Sophie, our 16-year-old daughter, who's in her rebellious phase. Megan and I were proud of the family we'd built. We had the nice house in a quiet neighborhood, the summer vacations, the friends over for barbecues on the weekends. It was the kind of life I'd dreamed about when I was a kid. I guess I was a fool for thinking it was real. It all started a few weeks ago, on a random Wednesday night. I got home from work later than usual, exhausted from back-to-back meetings. Megan was sitting at the kitchen table, typing something on her laptop. She didn't look up when I walked in, which was unusual. Normally, she'd smile, ask how my day was, maybe offer me a glass of wine. But that night, she just kept her eyes fixed on the screen, her fingers moving faster than I'd ever seen before. "Hey," I said, dropping my keys on the counter. "Everything okay?" She looked up then, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, fine. Just catching up on some emails." It didn't sit right with me. Megan was always good at faking smiles, but this one felt too tight, like she was forcing herself. I wanted to press her, to ask what was really going on, but something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was fear. The next few days were more of the same. Megan was distant, distracted. She'd pick up her phone whenever it buzzed, glancing at it quickly before tucking it away. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being paranoid. She was probably just stressed about something with the kids or maybe helping out a friend. But that nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. The real crack came on Saturday. We were supposed to go out for dinner, just the 2 of us, a rare date night we'd planned weeks in advance. But an hour before we were supposed to leave, Megan came into the living room, her face pale. "Jack, I'm so sorry," she said, wringing her hands together. "Something came up with Claire. She needs me to help her with a project. Can we reschedule?" It was such a flimsy excuse. Claire was her friend from the PTA, not a family member. And the look on Megan's face, like she was caught in a lie she couldn't figure out how to get out of, it made my stomach turn. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "We can go another night." She kissed me on the cheek, too quickly, and grabbed her purse. As she walked out the door, I noticed she was wearing the red dress. The one she hadn't worn in years. The one she used to put on when we had something special planned. I stood there, frozen, as the door clicked shut behind her. And that was the moment everything started to unravel. After Megan left, I sat on the couch, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I stared at the door, half expecting her to come back and tell me it was a joke, some stupid prank to teach me a lesson for being so oblivious. But she didn't come back. The house was eerily silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, but it didn't do much to settle my nerves. I tried watching TV, flipping through channels without really seeing what was on. My mind kept replaying that moment, Megan's rushed excuse, the dress, the way she didn't quite meet my eyes when she spoke. It didn't make sense. She wasn't meeting Claire for some project, I knew that much. Claire was out of town this weekend, attending her niece's wedding. Megan knew I'd know that, so why lie? I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. I could call her, ask where she really was. But what would that accomplish? If she was lying, she'd just make up another story. I could track her location. We'd set up that feature years ago when Ethan was still young, a safety precaution we'd agreed on. But doing that felt like crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross, not yet, anyway. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called our son, Ethan. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Dad? It's late, everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Yeah, sorry to bother you, kid. I was just wondering, have you talked to your mom today? Did she mention any plans for tonight?" There was a pause on the other end, long enough that I could hear the faint hum of whatever music he had playing in the background. "No, why? Is something wrong?" I forced a laugh. No. Just thought she might have mentioned something." "It's nothing. Sorry to wake you." "Okay," Ethan said slowly, like he didn't quite believe me. "Well, let me know if you need anything." We hung up, and I felt even worse than before. I'd never wanted to drag Ethan into this. He was just starting college, figuring out his own life. The last thing he needed was to be caught in the middle of whatever was happening between his parents. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. An hour passed, maybe two. The beer was empty, and I was halfway through another when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest as the front door creaked open. Megan walked in, her face flushed, hair slightly tousled. She looked startled when she saw me standing there, like she hadn't expected me to still be awake. "Oh," she said, slipping off her shoes. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice flat. "I was waiting for you." She hesitated, then gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry about tonight. Claire really needed my help." I felt a surge of anger, hot and bitter, rising in my throat. "Claire's out of town," I said quietly. "I called Ethan, just to check." Megan's smile faltered, and for a split second, I saw it, the guilt, the panic flashing in her eyes before she could hide it. "You called Ethan?" she repeated, her voice sharp now, defensive. "Why would you do that?" "Because you were lying," I shot back. "Where were you, Megan? And don't tell me it was with Claire, because I know that's not true." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she pressed her lips together, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. "Megan," I said, stepping closer. "What's going on? Just tell me the truth." For a moment, I thought she might. Her eyes softened, and she looked like she was about to say something real. But then she shook her head, as if deciding against it. "You're being ridiculous, Jack," she said, her voice cold and clipped. "I went out to meet Claire, and we ended up having a drink at the bar. That's it." I laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound. "You expect me to believe that? You've never lied to me like this before. What's happening, Megan? Why are you doing this?" She took a step back, her expression hardening. "I'm not doing anything. You're the one who's overreacting. Maybe if you weren't so wrapped up in work all the time, you'd know what's going on in your own home." Her words were like a slap to the face. We'd had arguments before, sure, but nothing like this. There was a venom in her voice I'd never heard before, a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "I'm not the one lying," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You are." Megan stared at me for a long moment, then turned on her heel and walked upstairs without another word. I listened to the sound of her footsteps, the creak of the bedroom door as it closed behind her. I stood there in the dark, the realization hitting me like a wave. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a rough patch. It wasn't something we could talk through or fix with a romantic weekend away. This was deeper, darker. And I was terrified to find out just how far it went. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a private investigator. The following days passed in a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety, half hoping and half dreading that it would be the investigator with news. Megan acted like everything was normal. She kissed me on the cheek when I left for work, made small talk at dinner, laughed with Sophie over some TV show they were watching. But I could see it now, the cracks in her performance. Her smiles were too forced, her laughter too loud. It was like she was trying to distract herself, or maybe trying to distract me. 3 days later, the call finally came. "Mr. Walker," the investigator said. "I have something you need to see." I met the investigator at a small coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind of place where people went to work quietly on their laptops or grab a quick espresso before heading into the office. It was perfect for a discreet meeting. The investigator, a wiry man named Paul with graying hair and a serious expression, waved me over to a corner table. "You came quickly," he said, looking up from his coffee. "I didn't want to wait," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. My heart was pounding, and my hands felt clammy. "What did you find?" Paul didn't waste time. He pulled out a manila envelope from his worn leather satchel and slid it across the table. "This isn't easy to look at," he warned. "But you asked for the truth." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. The first thing I saw was a photograph, taken with a long zoom lens. It was Megan, clear as day, sitting in a restaurant booth. Her face was turned slightly to the side, smiling at the man sitting across from her. He was leaning in close, whispering something in her ear, and she laughed, a laugh I recognized, one I hadn't heard in months. It wasn't just any smile, it was the kind she used to give me when we were young and in love, the kind that made me feel like I was the only man in the world. But I wasn't anymore. I flipped through the photos, each one more damning than the last. There was one of them holding hands as they walked down a quiet street, another of him opening the car door for her. The final picture made my stomach turn. It was taken outside a hotel, the two of them wrapped up in each other's arms, kissing like they were teenagers sneaking a moment behind the bleachers. "I'm sorry, Jack," Paul said softly. "I know this isn't what you wanted to see." I couldn't speak. The room seemed to close in around me, the air thick and suffocating. I felt like I was going to be sick. I'd expected this, hadn't I? But seeing it, having it confirmed in black and white, was a different kind of pain. It was like someone had reached inside me and ripped my heart out. "Who is he?" I managed to choke out, barely recognizing my own voice. Paul sighed, pulling out a small notebook. "His name is Daniel Reeves," he said. "He's an architect. Recently divorced. Lives a few towns over, in Pine Ridge. They've been meeting up regularly for at least 3 months, but I'd bet it's been going on longer than that. They're careful, but not careful enough." I stared at the photo of them kissing outside the hotel. It was a nice place, one Megan and I had stayed at years ago for our anniversary. A wave of bitter nostalgia washed over me, and I had to force myself to keep breathing. "Why?" I whispered, more to myself than to Paul. "Why would she do this?" Paul looked at me with something close to pity. "I don't know, Jack. But from what I've seen, this isn't a fling. It looks serious." Serious. The word felt like a punch to the gut. I could feel tears stinging the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I wasn't going to break down here, not in front of this man. I shoved the photos back into the envelope and pushed it away, as if that could make the images disappear from my mind. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "That's up to you," Paul said gently. "You can confront her, or you can walk away. I've seen both. There's no easy answer." I nodded numbly, slipping the envelope into my jacket pocket. "Thanks," I muttered, standing up abruptly. "I need to go." Paul gave me a sympathetic look. "Take care of yourself, Jack. And remember, whatever you decide, you didn't deserve this." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like I'd failed, like I'd been blind to something that had been right in front of me. I walked out of the coffee shop, the cold November air hitting me like a slap in the face. I needed to clear my head, needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do. I drove around for hours, aimlessly, the city blurring past me in a haze of red taillights and neon signs. I couldn't go home, not yet. I didn't know how I'd face Megan. I kept replaying the images in my mind, her laughing with him, kissing him. It was like a movie I couldn't turn off, one that kept looping over and over until I thought I'd go mad. Eventually, I ended up at a park near the edge of town. It was dark, the playground deserted, swings swaying gently in the wind. I sat down on a bench, burying my face in my hands. I don't know how long I sat there, just trying to breathe, to make sense of the chaos in my mind. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was Megan. I stared at the screen, watching her name flash, feeling a surge of anger mixed with heartbreak. I almost let it go to voicemail, but then, against my better judgment, I answered. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Where are you?" "It's late." "Out," I replied, my voice clipped. "Just needed some air." She paused, like she was trying to gauge my mood. "Jack," I was thinking, "maybe we could have a talk tonight. About us." The audacity of it made me laugh, a bitter, humorless sound that cut through the silence. "A talk? Now you want to talk? What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, a sharp edge to her voice. I clenched my teeth, the words bursting out before I could stop them. "It means I know, Megan. I know about Daniel. I've seen the photos. I know everything." The silence on the other end was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Jack, please, let me explain." I felt a surge of fury, white-hot and blinding. "Explain? What's there to explain, Megan? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back. Was this your plan all along? To play happy wife at home while you've got him waiting in the wings?" "It's not like that," she said, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Then what was it supposed to be?" I shouted, the anger spilling over, raw and uncontrollable. "What the hell was this supposed to be, Megan?" There was a long pause, then a sound I hadn't expected, sobs. Megan was crying, really crying, and for a split second, my anger wavered. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "I swear, Jack, I never wanted this." But it didn't matter. Her tears couldn't erase the images burned into my mind, the betrayal that had cut me to my core. I hung up without another word, letting the silence settle around me like a shroud. I sat there on the bench for a long time, staring at the empty playground, wondering how my life had come to this. Wondering if there was anything left worth saving. The drive home felt like it took forever, but at the same time, I wasn't sure I wanted it to end. I was caught in this limbo between fury and heartbreak, feeling like I was floating above my own life, watching it crumble to pieces. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did, calm, inviting, the porch light glowing softly against the dark. But now it felt like a stranger's house, not the place I'd called home for the last 20 years. I stepped inside, the familiar creak of the front door echoing in the silence. Megan was sitting on the couch, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and scared, like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Maybe I didn't recognize myself either. "Jack," she whispered, standing up. "We need to talk." I shut the door behind me, the sound louder than I intended. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. But when I looked at her, all I could see was that photograph of her with Daniel, the way she smiled at him, the way her body leaned into his. The way she used to smile at me. "You've been lying to me," I said quietly, each word feeling like it had jagged edges. "How long has this been going on?" Megan swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. "Jack, please, let me explain." "How long?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "How long have you been cheating on me, Megan?" She flinched at the word cheating, like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that at first, she said, her voice trembling. It started as a friendship. We were just talking, and then. I don't know when it changed. But it did. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. A friendship. Is that what you call it? Sneaking off to hotels together? Laughing behind my back while I was at work? Was that part of the friendship too? Her tears started again, running down her cheeks in silent streams. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry, Jack. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. Lie, I snapped. If you didn't want to hurt me, you wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't have lied, day after day, while you went off to be with him. Was it worth it, Megan? Was he worth it? She shook her head, sobbing harder now. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know how it got this far. I never meant for it to happen. I took a step closer, feeling the raw, burning pain in my chest that wouldn't go away. Did you love him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you love him? Megan hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I saw the answer in her eyes before she even said it. I don't know, she said again, her voice small and broken. I thought I did. But now I don't know anything. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I stumbled back, reaching for the arm of the chair to steady myself. You don't know, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You've thrown away everything we built together, for someone you're not even sure you love. She stepped toward me, her hands outstretched as if she wanted to comfort me, but I jerked away. Don't, I said, my voice sharp. Don't you dare touch me. Her face crumpled, and she sank to the floor, sobbing into her hands. I watched her, feeling this strange numbness wash over me. I'd thought seeing her cry would give me some kind of satisfaction, that it would make me feel vindicated. But it didn't. It just made me feel emptier than before. I want you out, I said finally, my voice flat and emotionless. I can't look at you right now. I need you to leave. Megan looked up, her eyes wide and pleading. Jack, please. Go, I snapped, pointing toward the door. Go stay with a friend, or book a hotel room. I don't care. But you're not staying here tonight. For a moment, it looked like she might argue, like she might refuse. But then she seemed to deflate, all the fight draining out of her. She stood up slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. I turned away, not wanting to watch her pack a bag, not wanting to see the life we'd built together reduced to this mess. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the quiet click of the bedroom door as she closed it behind her. I stood there, staring at the wall, feeling like I was going to collapse. When she came back down, she was carrying a small overnight bag. She paused in the doorway, looking at me one last time. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I know you don't believe me, but I am. I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just watched her walk out the door, the sound of it closing echoing through the house like a final, deafening silence. I sank down onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. The tears came then, hot and unrelenting, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. I cried for everything we'd lost, for the woman I thought I knew, for the life I'd built that had crumbled in front of me. I cried until there was nothing left, until I was empty, drained of everything. The silence in the house was unbearable. It was the sound of a broken promise, of a love that had rotted away without me even realizing it. I sat there for hours, staring into the darkness, trying to figure out what came next. But there were no answers, no clear path forward. Just a void, yawning open in front of me, and the realization that I was truly, utterly alone. It's strange how quickly a house can go from feeling like a home to feeling like a prison. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the clock felt like it was mocking me. I finally grabbed my car keys and drove. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get out, needed to escape the ghosts that filled every corner of this place. I ended up at a bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where nobody knows your name and nobody cares. I ordered a drink, then another, drowning the pain in whiskey until everything went blurry and numb. When I stumbled out into the night, I felt like I'd left a part of myself behind in that bar. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was the only way I'd survive this. But as I drove back home, the sun rising on another day I didn't want to face, I realized something. This was only the beginning. Would you like to continue with the fallout and what happens next between Jack and Megan? I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and the bitter taste of whiskey still lingering in my mouth. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, harsh and unforgiving. It felt like it was mocking me, like the universe itself was laughing at what I'd become, a broken man, sobbing into his drink while his wife was off with another man. But as I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, something inside me snapped. I was done crying. I was done feeling sorry for myself. If Megan thought she could shatter our life and walk away unscathed, she had another thing coming. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale and drawn, but there was something new in my expression, a cold, steely resolve I hadn't felt in years. It was time to take control. Time to make her pay. I started planning that very day. Revenge isn't something you rush into, it's something you savor. I wanted Megan to feel the same betrayal, the same humiliation that I'd felt when I saw those photos of her with Daniel. I wasn't just going to destroy her, I was going to destroy everything she valued, everything she'd built behind my back. And I knew exactly where to start. The first step was simple, I needed information. Megan was careful, but not careful enough. I went through her phone records, finding Daniel's number easily enough. I memorized it, then deleted any traces that I'd looked. I spent the next week gathering more evidence, watching her closely, noting every lie she told, every moment she slipped away to be with him. It was almost too easy. She'd grown complacent, assuming I was too weak, too heartbroken to fight back. She was wrong. One afternoon, while she was out running errands, I made a phone call to an old friend, John, a private investigator who owed me a favor. He'd helped me find some crucial information for a client at work years ago, and now it was time to call in that debt. John, I said, my voice calm and cold. I need you to dig up everything you can on a man named Daniel Reeves. Architect, divorced, lives in Pine Ridge. I want details, his work, his finances, his weaknesses. And I want it fast. John didn't ask questions. He just agreed, sensing the gravity in my voice. You got it, Jack. I'll have something for you in a few days. While John got to work, I started phase 2 of my plan, turning Megan's friends against her. She didn't know it, but I'd been cultivating friendships with some of the wives in our social circle for years. They trusted me, liked me even. They were quick to believe the story I started spinning, that Megan had been acting strange, that I was worried about her, that I thought something was wrong. I planted seeds of doubt, subtle whispers about how she'd been distant, how she'd started dressing differently, how I'd found receipts for hotel stays she couldn't explain. It didn't take long for the gossip to spread. Within a week, I could see it working. Megan's friends started pulling away from her, treating her with a mix of suspicion and pity. She had no idea why. And that was just the beginning. By the time John got back to me with his findings, I was ready to move on to the next step. He handed me a thick file, his expression somber. Jack, this guy's got skeletons in his closet, he said. He's up to his neck in debt. His business is failing, and he's been trying to keep it under wraps. If this gets out, he's done. A slow smile spread across my face. Perfect, I said, flipping through the documents. This is exactly what I needed. Armed with this new information, I made my move. I scheduled a meeting with one of Daniel's biggest clients, posing as a concerned party interested in his projects. It was easy enough to plant the seed of doubt, suggesting that I'd heard rumors about his financial instability, hinting that he might not be able to deliver on his promises. Within days, the client had pulled out of their contract. Daniel's firm took a massive hit, one I knew he couldn't afford. I imagined him sitting in his office, his head in his hands, as the news hit. It gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. This was just the start of his downfall. But it wasn't enough. I wanted to hit them where it hurt the most. The next weekend, Megan had plans to meet Daniel at a fancy restaurant in the city. I knew, because I'd overheard her on the phone, her voice low and seductive as she made the arrangements. I decided to crash their little date. I arrived at the restaurant early, taking a seat at the bar where I had a clear view of the entrance. I watched as they walked in together, laughing, looking every bit the happy couple. The sight of them made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was all part of the plan. I waited until they were seated, their drinks ordered, before I made my move. I walked over to their table, the smile on my face cold and calculated. "Hello, Megan," I said smoothly. "Daniel." The look on Megan's face was priceless, complete shock, her eyes wide with fear. Daniel looked confused at first, then wary as he realized who I was. "What are you doing here, Jack?" Megan stammered, her voice shaking. I ignored her, focusing on Daniel instead. "I just thought I'd introduce myself," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Jack Walker. The husband." Daniel went pale, his hand hanging limp in mine. I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't," I said, cutting him off. "But now you do." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice so only they could hear. "You should know that your little affair isn't as secret as you think. And if you want to keep your reputation, your career, and whatever's left of your dignity, you'll end this right now." Megan's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Jack, please, don't do this." I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Oh, Megan," I said softly. "This is just the beginning." I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them both sitting there, stunned and humiliated. It felt like I was breathing for the first time in months, the weight of betrayal lifting off my chest. I'd only just started to show them what real pain felt like. And I wasn't done yet. The satisfaction I felt leaving that restaurant didn't last. It was fleeting, like a shot of adrenaline that fades too fast. By the time I got home, the emptiness had crept back in, gnawing at the edges of my mind. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I sat in the dark for hours, staring at the wall, running through every step of my plan. It wasn't enough to humiliate them in public. I wanted to dismantle their lives piece by piece, the way they'd shattered mine. It was time to pull the final thread that would unravel everything. I spent the next week setting up the last act of my revenge. The private investigator had given me everything I needed to destroy Daniel's career, but I hadn't used it all yet. There were still emails, financial records, and photos, evidence of his shady business dealings and the affair, that would be more than enough to ruin him if they got out. I made anonymous copies and sent them to his business partners, his biggest clients, and the local media. I knew it would take time for the news to break, but it would. It was only a matter of days before Daniel would be exposed, before his professional life was left in ruins. But that was only half of it. Megan needed to feel the sting too. The night before everything went public, I invited her over. She'd been staying at a hotel since our last confrontation, calling me every day, leaving tearful voicemails begging me to talk. I ignored her until I was ready. Tonight, I was ready. She showed up at the door, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes were red, and her face was pale, like she hadn't slept in days. "Jack," she whispered. "Please, can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in. She walked into the living room, glancing around like she expected everything to be different, like she was a stranger here now. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. She hesitated, then sank onto the cushions. I took a seat across from her, feeling strangely calm, almost detached. I need to know why, I said quietly. Why him? Why now? Megan took a deep breath, her hands twisting together in her lap. I don't have a good answer, she admitted, her voice raw. It wasn't planned. It just happened. I was lonely, Jack. We were so distant. I felt like you didn't see me anymore, like I was invisible. I let out a harsh laugh. So you decided to screw another man instead? Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not excusing it. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But it wasn't about him. It was about us. About how lost I felt. I leaned forward, my expression hard. Lost? You think I didn't feel lost? You think I didn't notice things weren't right? But I didn't run off and have an affair, Megan. I didn't betray you. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Jack. I wish I could take it all back. I watched her cry, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? To see her broken, to see her realize the magnitude of what she'd done. But it didn't make me feel better. It didn't make the pain go away. You know, I said slowly, I could forgive you for the affair. I could. But I won't forgive you for making me feel like a fool. For lying to my face for months, for making me doubt myself. Megan looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with desperation. I'll do anything, Jack. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, just give me a chance to make it right. I shook my head. It's too late, I said flatly. It's over, Megan. And tomorrow, you'll see just how over it is. Her brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? I stood up, pulling out my phone. I opened my email and forwarded the evidence I'd collected, the photos, the financial records, everything, to her phone. I watched as she pulled it out, her expression changing from confusion to horror as she realized what I'd done. No, she whispered. Jack, please, you can't. It's already done, I said, my voice cold and final. By this time tomorrow, everyone will know. Your friends, your family, Daniel's colleagues. They'll know what you did. They'll know who you really are. She dropped the phone, staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Why? Why would you do this? Because you deserve it, I said simply. You both do. Megan crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her for a moment, feeling a strange sense of closure. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd taken back the power she'd stolen from me. But as I turned and walked out the door, leaving her there on the floor, I realized something. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won. The next day, the news broke. The emails went viral, the photos circulated, and the financial scandal ruined Daniel's reputation. Megan's phone must have been blowing up with messages from friends and family, but I didn't check. I didn't care anymore. I left town that morning, driving with no destination in mind, just wanting to escape the wreckage of what my life had become. I stopped at a small motel by the highway, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. I checked in, dropped my bag on the floor, and collapsed onto the bed. I stared up at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything I'd done pressing down on me. The revenge hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't healed the hurt or brought back the life I'd lost. It had only spread the pain around, poisoning everything it touched. I picked up my phone and looked at the last text Megan had sent me. It was simple, just 2 words. I'm sorry. I deleted it without replying. For the first time in my life, I realized I was truly, utterly alone. And it was my own doing. I'd wanted revenge, and I'd gotten it. But it didn't bring me peace. It only left me with an emptiness I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to fill.